It's time for the Creator Town Hall here on Studio Live today. This is our weekly show by creators and for creators, and it's brought to you by the wonderful folks over at BandLab. Yeah, if you're a music creator, you want to check out BandLab. It's a free service. You can create music in your browser, on your mobile device. There's a whole community of folks there. We'll talk a little more about BandLab a bit later, but we better crack straight on because I've got a wonderful guest today, a singer, songwriter, music teacher extraordinaire. Please welcome back to Studio Live today, the wonderful April Keez. How are you doing today, April?
Hi, I'm well. It's so great to see you again.
Likewise, we were working out in the pre-show. I told you we'd break the fourth wall here, but in the pre-show we were chatting that it was January 2020. And can we just say the world was a different place in January 2020, just a little bit, when we last spoke? So it's been a long time. A long time between chats. For folks who don't know who you are and what you do, obviously I gave a very vague introduction there. Who are you, April, and what do you do around here on the YouTubes and around the place?
So I make tutorials about songwriting. I also walk through my own songwriting process. I post my own music. But I am a singer-songwriter. I'm a music teacher. In my real life, I teach at an elementary school. One of my students made me this today. It was her last music class of the year.
Oh,
Yeah. And I teach private lessons. I do all sorts of stuff in my daily life, but I make music constantly. That's the constant.
love it. That's the 2022 way, isn't it? To do a lot of things, to diversify and do lots of different things. But it's very cool to have you back here. We're going to be talking all about songwriting today. And if you're here live and you got questions about songwriting, please just throw them here in the chat. And if you're watching on the replay, we love you just as much. I'm sure myself and April will be down in the comments after the show answering any of your questions that you have down there. So I like to ask folks, and you know, we talked about this, but it's been nearly 3 years since we last chatted. So I like to hear about people's origin story, and then perhaps even more importantly, what you've been up to more recently. So why don't you take us through the quick version, a couple of minutes on where you came from, why music is so important to you, and why you've chosen to dedicate your life to this little thing we call music.
Well, I've been making music since I was a kid. Like, truly, I've been writing songs. I had a little box. It was blue. It had Tweety Bird on it. And I would open it up, and it was this treasure trove of little bits of pieces of paper that had all of my songs written on them.
Wow.
So I didn't play any instruments as a kid. I just really, really loved to write. And I wrote constantly, like all the time. And so I would like sneak in my closet at night when everyone else was sleeping, and I'd turn the light on, and I would just kind of go through my box of all my songs and like sing them to myself. And they were all things like Perfectly Imperfect. And like, I don't know, I had one that was When You Hold My Hand. Super like little kid, wonderful, fun stuff. And then as I got older, that absolute love never went away. My dad's a massive Leonard Cohen fan, so I spent like my entire childhood. There was, like in that whole world. So long, Mary. Like that was totally everything I listened to as a kid. So I just, I grew up. My mom was always singing everywhere she goes. She's humming If I Only Had a Brain, like constantly. She has like 4 songs that she does on repeat. So yeah, I just grew up in a house where I felt very encouraged to pursue music, which I am very fortunate to have had. And yeah, I was always drawn to it. I always wrote things constantly. And then I picked up guitar when I was 14. And then I went to Berklee College of Music for my undergrad and learned the piano while I was there. And then subsequently started taking more lessons, got really into the piano, and voice was my primary in college. And then, yeah, I just got really deep into that little rabbit hole, and here I am. I've been teaching for about 10 years, and I'm currently in grad school, actually. I'm doing a songwriting grad degree at Berklee, so.
Wow. Yeah. When I get people on here, I'm like, with the level of education that you have, I'm just like, oh, okay. People don't need to feel bad. Like we're all at different levels, but I'm just like, that's pretty darn cool. To be doing a graduate. I didn't even know that was a thing. Very cool.
It's a pretty new thing, honestly, that they've just started. Like these programs have just started kind of cropping up. And honestly, when I saw that this was even a thing, I'm just a very curiosity driven person. Like everything I do is just curiosity first. So I kind of go into the process of songwriting from the perspective of what do I want to learn through this song today, you know? So yeah, I felt like that was a really exciting place that I just was really drawn, drawn toward.
Yeah.
Um,
Very cool. So that is cool. Have you done any videos on your YouTube channel about your? Do you still have your box of little writings and musings?
I don't, that's a lie. I do have it. It's in a box somewhere in my basement, and one day I will fish it out, and it'll be a fascinating experience. But I did on my channel. I had this video I made called "Editing My Old Songs and Cringing."
Oh,
So I took a song that I wrote when I was like, 15, 16, that was like, I'm dreaming of this person I have a crush on. Like, it's cringy as anything.
yeah.
But actually, I found that it was less cringy than I thought it was, to be honest.
It is funny, isn't it? There's something about our own work that makes you cringe a lot more, and then you compare it to something that you'd hear on the radio or on a Spotify playlist now, and you're like, actually, all songs are kind of cringy like that. Like no song is like just what people would say in real life because it's art. Like it's supposed to be accentuated and passionate and a little bit more out there.
Well, and I think having taught kids for so long, I've been working
Mm,
with kids and teenagers and even, adults. I've worked with people in their 70s and 80s who are getting into songwriting. And having worked with a lot of people in this field, I feel like I have so much more empathy and compassion for myself, honestly. Like just saying, like, I've seen someone at the very beginning and I've seen how much that person has grown. It's
mm.
truly remarkable. Some of these people I've worked with, like they come in on their first day and they can't think of anything and they're like tortured about it. And then like 6 months down the road, they're like, I'm going for it. So I'm never gonna judge
Totally.
myself or anybody else about songwriting because it's such an awesome thing to explore, regardless
Mm.
of how you feel your abilities are.
Totally, and we're going to deep dive into that. We've got 53 minutes left of goodness, all about songwriting coming up here on the show today, folks. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say g'day to all the wonderful folks who are here hanging out with us today. So hello to Luke Roberts, g'day to Mark Bro, hello to Mike over at Creative Source, who has a show, Fix My Mix, coming up straight after this show, so do hang around for that one. G'day Thomas Christ, one of our wonderful moderators, Joe and Barry Glenn, Audible Video, we've got Tom Carrera here as well, Mr. Dan Ekberg. We've got, we'll sort of just pause on this one. Alicia, hello to you. I was wondering if she has any advice for visually impaired and completely blind person to make music. That's an interesting one. You've obviously worked with a lot of students. Have you worked with anyone with visual impairment, or do you have any tips around different ways to do that? I know that's a fairly niche kind of question to sort of open up with.
Love that question. I have not personally. I had a friend in college who was blind, and I guess what I kind of saw from him, and this is me just totally projecting a friend's
Mm,
experience. This is not my story to tell, but I'm going to kind of build my own
yeah.
brain space around it. What I would say is I think that reading music feels like one of those things they tell you you have to do. And I think if your eyes are not reading music eyes, and that counts for people with like dyslexia as well, people who have
Yeah.
trouble reading, I honestly feel like there is so much more to music from the ear than there is to music from the eyes. It's a sonic art form. So I
Mm,
think there are so many different kind of beautiful, wonderful places you can go from that. I think a lot of it comes from so many people, and especially in the jazz world, a lot of people are
mm,
taught from the ear. They're listening to stuff and they're trying to figure it out. But for me personally, when I'm playing piano, especially, and actually guitar as well, it's all shape based.
mm,
So when I'm playing, like a D major chord on the guitar, I am basically thinking in terms of this really specific shape. So my
mm.
hand kind of naturally falls into a shape. And I would say the same about the piano. I did a video a while back that was about learning how to play vocal warm ups on the piano. And basically, as you're playing, you can sort of think of it like the triads, the notes, the chords that are made up of three notes are all kind of built around these specific shapes that show up all over the place. So a C major chord is the exact same shape as an F major chord and a G major
Mm.
chord and an A minor chord. They're all just moving your hand around. So if you can just get used to the space between those notes, and if you can get
Mm.
used to the hand shape that you're creating, it becomes a little bit of an easier process. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's very cool. And you only have to look around at some of the amazing vision impaired musicians. You look at Stevie Wonder, you look at Ray Charles. Like these guys could absolutely rock their instruments and were amazing singers. And something I've noticed, like watching even your videos, April, is when you're really getting passionate about singing. How many of us close our eyes anyway? And like even playing your instrument, you close your eyes. That guitar solo where you're shredding and you got your eyes closed. So I think there's that's a really good way to start. And the other thing I'll say is if you are visually impaired, a lot of your mobile devices, like a lot of companies like Apple and Google and people are doing amazing things with their voiceover and some of the other tools that you have now that are available. So you can still record and create and record your own music, regardless of your visual impairment. So that's very cool. Luke says, why song structure, aka the arrangement, is very important to songwriting, aka the story process. So what's your thoughts on the? We were going to get into this. This was our next topic anyway. So when you're starting to write song, why is it important? Why would you start writing songs? And how do you start structuring a song? What's the process with the arrangement of a song?
So I've seen you around my channel, Luke. I saw your comments before. Hi, it's nice to meet you. But yeah, I would say that song structure is really important, just because it's nice to have a place to go. Honestly, I think so much of it is that if you know where you're going, you know how to get there. It's about finding kind of the journey to get to that spot. And for some people, writing stream of consciousness totally works, and that's awesome too.
Mm.
But what I would say is that I feel like song structure is really fun because you start to notice similarities in different genres and different songs that you like. And if you can pinpoint the specific structures that you like in the songs you listen to, it's way easier to create those things. So, I mean, personally, what I notice in a lot of the songs that I listen to and like, I notice especially, I like a lot of verse refrain songs. I said I grew up listening to a lot of Leonard Cohen, a lot of, a lot of things that are in that, 60s folk revival world. So what I've sort of found is that a lot of the songs I love have this really specific song structure where the verses are telling a story that's very visual, very visceral, and then there's that punchline at the end of that section. Tangled up in blue, you get your thing. The wind cried Mary. So you have something that kind of falls at the very end of that section. So for me, that was always something that I would kind of try to emulate. Like, oh, okay, I know these artists are doing it and I love these artists. So what I'm going to try to do is come up with a punchline that makes sense with the rest of this section so that it's really effective. And then when you get to like a bridge section, that's contrast, right? You just want something different. It's ear candy. It's something a little different from what you've been hearing. So I think for me, learning about song structure, it just enhances the whole process. It makes it, I guess, a little bit easier. It feels a little bit more like Sudoku,
Yeah.
You're kind of plugging in the numbers where they go.
I like it. It's I often say that's really good points that you make there, and I often say that it's good to learn the rules so that when you then inevitably go and break them, you at least have a baseline for what you're doing. Because I don't think there's no cookie cutter pattern for a lot of the things we do in music. It should be very expressive, but even like sometimes I learn what I'm doing after I've done it. So I'll do something and then I'll go and study, and you can do it either way, whatever works for you. So you can actually you can start writing songs because many folks that are watching here live and on the replay are songwriters, and they probably haven't done a lot of studying of song structure. They're probably not sure what sort of song structure they're using, and then you can go and learn that sort of stuff and go, okay, I was actually using that structure all along. I just didn't really know about it. Very cool. We'll jump on to another topic in just a moment. Music from the soul, says Tom. Absolutely. Music can be done from just feel. The language of music is not essential. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like music crosses language barriers. It crosses all sorts of barriers. And we find that I do a show every week where I play other people's music. And sometimes some of the most meaningful and passionate songs are in a language that I don't actually speak or understand. So that's very cool stuff. Music, it's from the ear and from the heart. Absolutely. And Doug says, did BB King ever open his eyes? Right. If you ever watch old BB King footage, that dude was shredding on the guitar, and I don't think he opened his eyes from the start to the finish of anything he played.
There's pictures online where it's the stank faces with the slug. It's
Oh,
like John Mayer,
yeah.
like a thing, and they put the slug in where the guitar was.
It's yeah, it's kind of gross. Again, we were talking about that pre-show too, as well, about your cringe. We were talking at the start of the show, weren't we, about the cringe that you had, and yeah, something about the cringe of you. That's right. We were talking about making videos, and sometimes you'll film yourself, and you look at the end, and you're like, I didn't realize I even made that face. What the
Right.
heck is that? Alrighty. So how do you get started? Like when you're writing a song and you're sitting there with your blank brain and your blank sheet of paper or your blank notebook, or where do you start? Like if you want to say, sit down, I'm going to write a song. What do I do? How do I get
Right.
there?
So what I tend to do in life, like this is my own personal process, is that I just write down stuff when I see it. So if I'm just kind of walking down the street and I notice, a sign that says hidden driveway, but I don't see a driveway, I'm like, ooh, like I just, whenever I notice something that looks weird or out of place, or especially like exciting to me, like I look
Mm,
at this right out my window. I've got these beautiful roses that are growing in right now, and
mm,
so I've been writing a lot of songs about flowers lately. Just in general, that's been where my brain's been going. But yeah, so I just take notes everywhere I go, and I try not to write a whole song on the spot if I don't have time to do it. Like I'm not going to write like two verses and then just like stop, because my fear is that I'm not going to come back to it. And again, this is a totally personal thing. This is different for
mm,
everyone. But for me, I will write down two sentences. I will shut my phone, come back to it later, and then I'll have a beautiful idea I can get started with. And usually that song's going to be way better than if I wrote the second half later and Frankenstein them. So that's sort of
mhm,
where I go with it. I have a lot of students who I work with who stare at that blank page. And what I tell them to do is either start with a writing prompt or start with however you're feeling right now. So, if for
mm,
instance, I'm super excited, that I get to hang out with all of you on this live stream, I would write down the word excited. And then from there, I could think about all of the different things that make me excited. So I sort of bubble map it, right? It's like a little
mm,
picture of the sun, you're just writing different things on each of those lines. And then from there, it becomes a lot easier to just start brainstorming ideas. And for me, I'm a very image driven person. My brain is very colorful.
mm,
So what I tend to do is I think in colors, I think in shapes, I think in patterns. So when I am going into that writing process, what I have all of my students do is go into it from the perspective of, let's try to describe the scene in as much intense detail as possible. So, if I'm describing being excited because, I get to hang out with all of these awesome people on a live stream, then I could maybe start talking about, okay, well, right now I can smell, the fresh cut grass from my neighbor's lawnmower, and I can taste, the water from my Kermit cup with the lipstick smudge right on it, right? I can see my cat in the window over there, and she was trying to bug me earlier. So I can write down all of those things that are currently happening, and
mm,
then take all of those ideas, because now I have all of these beautiful visuals and
mm,
sonic concepts and touch, and taste and smell. So all of those things exist now on the page. And so you don't have to go from nothing. You can
mm,
go from whatever sensory experiences you're having, or go from a memory, watch a movie, like watch
mm.
watch Eternal Sunshine and then write a song about lying down on ice. Do what you got to do, but there's always
I love it.
inspiration somewhere.
Very, very cool. Yeah, like, there's so many different ways that you can do this, and you're right. Like I think it's a lot of the time it's that we want to put ourselves in like a pigeonhole, and we want to just constrict and restrict what we're thinking about and what we're doing. Whereas really, you've got the entire world around you that you can use, and you've got all of your senses and all your thoughts and all your emotions, and yeah, there's all of those that you can choose to tap into that are going to make a great song in the end. Question here from Mike over at Creative Source: how do lyrics differ from poetry? So you talked about the fact that you used to write sort of little things that maybe were just words, and how do lyrics of a song differ from a poem? I've never even thought of that question. It's an interesting one.
That's a great question. I actually minored in poetry in college, in case you were wondering.
Of
But
course you did. Oh, we've
first
got the perfect person.
but yeah, so basically, what I would say is the structures tend to be a little different. In a poem, for instance, you because it's a visual medium, and of course, slam poetry is a little bit different if you're doing performance poetry, but in the case of a written poem on the page, there is this really cool thing you can do with titles where you can write the title of the song and it has nothing to do with the text, for instance.
Mm.
And then it informs the text, right? So if you're writing about footsteps on the beach and a drink in your hand in your poem, your title can be "Before You Died," or your title can be "Transients," or your title can be "Cat Off in the Corner." So your title can be whatever you want it to be, but whatever that title is going to inform the actual thing that's happening. However, because music is a sonic experience and songwriting is a sonic experience, something like a title isn't actually going to show up if you just hear that song on the radio or something.
Mm.
So, unless you're in, one of these pop punk bands that I listened to when I was in high school, unless you're Panic at the Disco, your title is probably going to be in your chorus. So a lot of the time what we do is we create all of those beautiful images in our verses so that we can set up the story. My cat is actually trying to climb up the window. Hey, dude, what's up?
We accept all pets on this show.
You're doing? It's insane right now. But yeah, so basically what you're doing is you're setting up all of those beautiful images in your verses. And then by the time you get to your chorus, that's when you unleash whatever's happening in your title. That's when you're giving them this is what's informing the whole story, which I think is a really cool thing about songwriting. But yeah, they're just slightly different. There are different forms, different contexts. And I think you can take a poem and turn it into a song, or take a song and turn it into a poem pretty easily, especially if you're Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think they're very similar, but do have those sorts of little subtle differences that can make a really big difference as you're actually getting into the process of writing one or the other.
Very cool. I love it. We've got a whole bunch more to talk about here. We're less than halfway through here, but I did want to pause. If you're just joining us here, my guest today on the Creator Town Hall is April Keez, singer, songwriter, music teacher. And if you want to check out what April's got going on, jump on over to the links. There's her webpage there, aprilkeez.com. Couldn't be easier. April, Keez. Or Z if you're Australian like me. So jump on over there. Do subscribe to her on YouTube. Just past 8,000 subscribers, 8,000 songwriting fans over there, which is pretty darn impressive. And this is impressing me. If you go to Skillshare and you go to the music classes here, look who we got here on the top line here. We've got one of the featured courses here is Level Up Your Lyric Writing. So a creative guide to songwriting like a pro. And there's a link down in the description that can get you, is it a month free, I think, with Skillshare, if we join up here. Yeah, there you go. 1 month of Skillshare free. So if you haven't tried Skillshare, great place to learn about things. And you can take April's course on Skillshare and check out all the other cool stuff over there as well. Let's jump into, where do we want to go? What about songwriter's block? We actually, I'll ask it in form of this, because we had Apple Charlotte here who made the comment that I'm just trying to find it. I can't write lyrics to save my life, and whenever I hear the word "can't" from someone, I always add "yet." Because I think that anything can be learned. There's natural talent and then there's learned skills, and you can definitely apply both. So for someone like Charlotte says, I can't write lyrics to save my life. I've just got complete block. There's no way I can get anything out of my brain. It just doesn't work. Where do you start? How do you overcome something like that?
See, that's a funny one. And honestly, Charlotte, that is a really, or Apple Charlotte, whichever you prefer. Might be Apple. But whichever... Basically, what I would say is a lot of people have this frustration. This is a really, really common thing. And what I think, and this is just me getting a little bit, off in the ether here, but something that I think happens is that a lot of us, when we go into studying music, we do it because it is something that we're drawn to and not something we have to do, right? Like when we learn how to play an instrument, it's because, or, sometimes it's our parents making us do it, but either way, we're going into it as an elective, right? It's something we're choosing or something that someone's choosing for us,
Yeah.
but it's not actually something that's forced upon people. It's not a core class. It's not like math when you're in elementary school or middle
Yeah.
school. So basically what winds up happening is that because we take English class or we take, whatever language we speak, whatever language arts class we're taking, there tends to be this sort of feeling of, I already know all of that because you learned it, in school for all of these years. Like I didn't take, 18 years worth of English classes for nothing, right? But what actually winds up happening with a lot of people writing lyrics is that people don't realize there's actually a little bit more to it, right? Like that it's not just like we're putting words on the page, that there's a really specific set of forms and structures and all of these little tricks and tips that you can actually utilize in your songwriting. So what I would say as far as learning how to write lyrics is that you should keep an open mind and just get started with super simple stuff. And I think the absolute best place you can start is with learning about your senses and focusing on your senses. Just kind of how I was talking before, right? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? So what I like to do is start with a place, a person, an object, right? Like if it's a cup of coffee, right? Just describe that cup of coffee super intensely. I call this process zooming out. But you're describing that it's bitter, right? It's full-bodied. It's, however you want to describe it. And you describe how it smells. You describe, okay, it's black, but when I pour the milk in, it creates this little pattern on the top, right? So you can kind of picture those things. You can picture the steam and how, I wear glasses when they don't reflect off of a camera, but the steam, fills up my whole vision because it, gets in the way of my glasses. So what I would say in that sort of case is, right, you're writing down all of those kinds of ideas that start coming up. And in that process, you're going to just be jogging your brain, but then you can zoom out and then you can think about, okay, where am I drinking this coffee? Who's with me drinking coffee? Am I talking to my mom? Like, are we having a conversation? Are we gossiping? Or am I talking to my romantic partner? Am I sitting with my husband? We're having a cup of coffee. Is it the morning? Is it the evening? Like what is going on in the world? Am I watching the news? Am I watching, a movie? Am I reading a book? Am I doing a puzzle? So many different things could be happening with a cup of coffee. And what's cool about this sort of exercise is that anybody can do it and everyone's going to come up with something different because as much stuff as I know about songwriting and the different, classes I've taken over my life and the different things I've taken over my life, I don't have your lived experience. You are the only one who has your lived experience. So you are more capable than anybody else in the world to carve out your little corner of the world and talk about it in a way that only you know how to. So I think there's something really special and cool about lyric writing in that way. I think language is just one of my favorite things in the world.
It's so cool.
That's a great place to start. And then even from there, you can zoom out into what is the overall emotion of the room. And then you've got a whole set of circumstances that you can start writing about. I think that's a fun place to start.
Yeah, no, that's it's really good. It's, again, I'm sitting just here thinking, just going, oh yeah, like it's good to sort of talk about these things and verbalize them because quite often we get stuck in our own heads and we're not actually talking about the process we're going through. And I think Audible Video's got a good point here. Don't let fear of perfection stop you from trying. It's a muscle, and yeah, anything you do, it's a muscle. It's repeat, and that's why our mantra on this channel is create, record, release, because you've got to do all three of those components. You've got to finish. You've got to start, you've got to do it, you've got to finish, and then go back to the start, because it's only by repetition that you're actually going to get better. And I think going back to Apple Charlotte's question, it really, you may be looking at that going, I don't write a song like insert name of great song. I don't write a Leonard Cohen song yet. Well, Leonard Cohen's first song probably wasn't an amazing Leonard Cohen song either. You got to start somewhere. You've actually got to do that. Cool stuff. So, speaking of Songwriter's Block, we are sponsored today by the wonderful folks over at BandLab. And if you haven't checked out BandLab before, it is a very, very cool platform. It's a great place to chat with other creators. If you're talking about singing and songwriting and collaborating, you can jump in here. You can follow me. You can follow other artists, and you can find out what they're creating. And you can actually collaborate. We'll talk with April about collaborating on songs a little bit later. But there's a very cool feature that's related to what we're chatting about here today. And we'll talk talk lyrics or music and which one you prefer to go with first in a little while. But there's a very cool feature they've just launched called the Song Starter. So if you say you've got some lyrical ideas, but you got no idea where to start musically, if you jump into the Song Starter here, you can actually play around with this one. You can just literally hit the dice there, or what you can do, you can throw in some lyrics here. So you can enter some lyrics. So I'll go with April's here, where she's got roses blooming in the yard, and we'll just see what the AI algorithm brings up. So we'll hit the let's go button. It's going to generate some ideas for us, and this could be interesting for a song idea, and it's going to start playing in about 3 seconds. So we can go with that one. There's 3 options for each one, so we can try a different kind of feel. Bit more of a pop vibe there. Maybe not that one. So yeah, it gives you some different generated chord progressions. You can change the feel here from sort of sunset to daytime to nighttime. So what's the night one sound like? Oh, I don't mind that. And here's the cool thing. Once you pick one that you're like, yeah, let's build a song around that, you just hit this Open in Studio button, and it opens it up in BandLab right here on your browser to get you started, to get your recording. So it's just taking a moment because I've got all the windows in the world open here on my computer. But there you go. So you've got your melody line, you've got your pads, you've got your bass, you've got your drums, and then you can actually add to this and start building this song out from there. So you can change all this up, you can edit your instruments, you can edit everything right there in BandLab. So it's a cool way that if you're sitting back and you're like, I don't have any musical ideas, there's something that you can actually try. So we'll turn that volume down again there. So when it comes to writing music, do you go with the lyrics first? We've talked a lot about lyric writing and probably less about music. So if I had to guess, I'd say that lyrics are probably what you would have an idea around first. Or do you or am I completely wrong? Do you go with chord progressions and sounds first?
You know, I am one of those people where I will start in a different place with every song, to be honest. I know this feels like a cop out a little bit, but I think of songwriting as this big, like this massive ball, right? It's just this big circle, and you can just attack it from any angle as long as you're able to get inside. You know what I mean? It's like a big old bubble. So for me, sometimes I am starting with a weird little lyric idea, something that kind of came to me. And, I'm driving in the car and I'm like, oh, I have to pull over, and I pull over and I write down my little lyric idea and I keep moving. Or sometimes I get a little melody and I'm singing in the shower. The acoustics are great. And I get out the shower, shampoo my hair. So it all comes up at different times. And when I sit down to write, I mean business. Like I sit down and I am very in the zone when I get into writing. And, someone walks in the room and I get out. I'm working on a thing. But so basically what I would say is a lot of the time for me, it tends to come all at the same time. I think I've just been doing it for a really long time. And so lyrics sort of just spark in my head and I think about it in terms of what the music would sound like. So you can think of the idea of like word painting, for instance, thinking in terms of like, if I'm singing, honestly, actually, the only example I can come up with is the opposite of this, but a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, and she sings up. It's the only example that comes to mind. But that concept, or if you take the song Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor, and all of those things are happening in the chord progression as he's singing those words, which is just a little bit of geekiness for you. But
it's fun to geek out, isn't it? Yeah. Once you sort of start hearing those things and you're like, oh, wow, because you can listen to it on different levels, I think. And
right.
do you ever wish, this is going to be a weird question, but do you ever wish that you didn't know as much about songwriting? Does it sometimes spoil just the indulgence in listening to music? Are you constantly analyzing chord structures and patterns and sequences and instrumentation, or can you still enjoy it?
When I'm writing, I never regret a single bit of it. I'm truly like, as I'm in the process of writing, every little detail I've ever learned, and this doesn't even have to be songwriting. I mean, there are moments where I'm writing about stuff I learned in biology class in high school. I swear, like, honestly, when I was in middle school, I tell people this all the time. When I was in middle school, I wrote a poem about the x-axis and the y-axis of a scatter plot falling in love. and how they could only meet that once and then they were gone forever. So I could write a song about it. Anything. But basically what I would kind of say is that I feel like there's I guess for me it sort of feels like there's this kind of set of patterns that get sparked. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I would go with it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let us know if you're here live or if you're watching on the replay. Let us know your process in this, and because I think there's interestingly enough, and I don't know if this is your experience or you're sort of too far down the rabbit hole because you've been doing songwriting so long. But I think sometimes we start out all enthused and all ready to rock and roll, and with all these ideas, and then you hit that plateau in any learning experience. There's always that plateau where you're not getting better, and sometimes it even feels like you're getting worse or you're going downhill. What do you do when you've got a student that's like that, where they're like, I want to throw in the towel. This is getting too frustrating. I loved it at first, and now I'm not liking it. What are some tips and ideas to help with that, or to push through some of those barriers?
For me personally, it's learning something new. And
Mm.
this isn't the case for everybody. I've had students where, they're really genuinely struggling, but then they work at one thing and then that thing clicks and they're in it and they're back in. For me, it tends to be learn something new, do something different, like change up the game. When I was writing song after song after song on the guitar, I was playing those same campfire chords all the time. And my hands are
Mm.
so super small that when I was first learning bar chords, they were so
Oh.
difficult. So I was stuck using like the first 3 frets in the same old shapes over and over and over. And for me, the thing that helped was I had this teacher in college who just said, "Why are you staying in those frets? Move somewhere else."
Mm.
And then I was like, wait a minute, I can actually bring that shape over here and it still makes a noise that I like. And that totally blew my head right off. But
Yeah.
some things like that I think are great. Pick up a new instrument even. And, I think people, struggle with this concept of juggling instruments. I have a video about this somewhere on my page, but the concept of like you're playing too many different things and your brain is scattered. But really for me, being able to play more than one thing means that if I'm getting really frustrated with the guitar today, maybe my brain is in a more piano mood. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I'm just having a uke kind of day. Or I did this project with my elementary school kids. I've been teaching in the school. And I did this project where we did found instruments. So we did this whole thing
Yeah.
where I brought in my recording equipment to school and was like, all right, this distance away, get back. But we brought the microphone and all of the stuff into school. And I had a bunch of stuff that I set out on the tables. Crinkly plastic bags and paper cups and pieces of string, like rubber bands, totally random stuff that we found around the room, along with like a couple of boom whackers and some rhythm sticks and all that. And the kids were able to just explore those things as instruments. Hey, what kind of sound does it make when you kick your shoe against the side of your desk? That sort of.
Mm.
And we wound up. Oh, I love a kalimba. Awesome. But yeah, what kind of sound do those things make? Everything in the world can be a musical instrument if you want it to be. So
Yeah.
it's sort of about just finding the thing that will spark you in that moment. And that doesn't have to be an instrument, but it can be a piece of information you learn, a piece of yourself that you learn about, something
Mm.
deep and intense that just sort of comes out and you go, wow, I didn't know that about myself. For me,
Yeah.
that's the thing that breaks it.
That's so cool, and it reminded me actually. I use Masterclass. I mean, Skillshare is great too, and you should check out April's course on Skillshare. But on Masterclass, Sheila E teaches percussion and drumming, and basically the entire first chapter is her just going, right, we're going to my kitchen and we're making sounds, and she just got every single thing in her kitchen, and she made this amazing beat with like all sorts of weird utensils and weird devices in the kitchen, and just said, all right, now this is what you can do. She's like, yeah, I've got access to $1 million studio, but I've also got my kitchen, and sometimes your kitchen's going to make you more creative than going into $1 million studio. So yeah, I just love that concept of the found sounds, and we're so lucky that we live in the future that anytime you've got your smartphone in your hand, you can record something and then use that in a song. Like everything is available to you all the time, which is kind of crazy. Really good point here from EmoBot 9000. I'm interested in your take on this. He says that I feel every instrumentalist should learn how to record and produce at least on a basic level. level. Is that so? I guess two-part question. Do you record and produce your own music as well as all the other things that you do? And do you think that people should learn to at least be able to record their own kind of demos and things? And is production an important part of songwriting?
Yes. So this is a funny thing, because if you asked me this 2 years ago, and I think
Mm.
maybe you did ask me this 2 years
I
ago,
probably did.
I was not able to do that really. I
Mm.
was recording things at a very basic level into Logic. I'd press the button, I'd go, and I'd cut and
Yeah.
paste or whatever. But at this point, I actually am learning quite a lot. And I'm still learning and growing. But it's a thing that I was never really exposed to. Like I'm 31. I'm like, yeah, it kind of rolled along as I was coming up. But for me, I am starting to really get to the point where I am capable of doing that for myself. And I really enjoy it. It's really fun. And I don't know why I was so afraid of it for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for everybody, like learning how to record your own music can just be so liberating. And I think the second you stop thinking of it as scary technology, like I did, and
Mm.
start thinking of it as another creative pursuit, for me, creativity is what makes me feel alive in this world. Like
Yep.
anything creative, I make YouTube videos. I like to paint sometimes. I like to draw. I do anything creative, and that makes me feel like I am alive in this world. It is the
Yeah.
thing that lights me up. So getting to the point where I was able to recognize DAWs as a creative thing to do, being able to be like, ooh, wait, but what if I EQ this? Ooh, it changed the sound. It's just
Yeah.
a totally different experience, kind of getting to understand this thing that seemed really daunting at first. So what I would say is, yes, I think every single musician should learn how to use a DAW in some capacity. And I think it doesn't have to be so scary. It's like
It really doesn't, and it's so true. Like again, like my journey in YouTube land started because I was in the same boat. Like I'd recorded on 4-track recorders because I'm an old man way back in the day, but I didn't really have a lot of experience in digital audio workstations, and I wanted to learn something simple, so I started learning GarageBand on my iPad and my iPhone at the time, and realized that hey, there are other people just like me that didn't want all the complex tools and knobs and toys. They just wanted a quick and simple way to record their stuff, but have that creative outlet. And the great thing about things like this is I can't play a violin, but guess what? I can grab a violin in any DAW and a string sound and hit my key on the keyboard, or just put a MIDI loop in there and it'll play it all for me. And that can actually be real. Like people poo-poo that. They're like, oh, you can't use loops, you can't use instruments. Like everything must be full live instrumentation. I'm like, no. In 2022, yeah, I think you can use a lot of different tools to get the job done. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention BandLab because again, if you don't have anything, free DAW in your browser, people. So there's zero excuse to not go and try it out. And that has some amazing sounds and loops and a whole sound library and all the virtual instruments that you can need to get started. So do check out our wonderful sponsors, BandLab. We are, would you believe, nearly 15 minutes left here in the show, April. It flies by when you're talking songwriting for sure. What are some other tips? This is a very general question, I know, but some tips and some tools for folks that they may not sort of think about or may not acknowledge when you're sitting down to write a song. What sort of some of the stuff or some of the things that you use or some of the tips that you may have for folks?
That's a good question. I would say number one, mix things up, right? If you tend to write lyrics first, do your best, write a chord progression, see how that goes for you. Or if you tend to write the music and the lyrics at the same time, I think it can be a really good exercise to try to write the lyrics first, or see what happens if you plug something into a DAW and write something around that kind of loop to top line it. I think mixing up the process is just immeasurably wonderful. I think it can just make such a big difference in your capacity and ability as a songwriter. You'll grow so much through that. And then you can start anywhere. You don't necessarily have to like stick to your one little slice of that pie. You can kind of go in anywhere, and your songs are going to turn out totally differently. Like when I write a lyrics first song, it's going to be totally wildly different than like a rhythmic kind of groove song, right? They're going to wind up being totally opposite. At the same time, they all sound like me, right? So what I would say is I think that's a great place to start. I think another thing that I find really helpful, especially for new songwriters or people who kind of get stuck halfway through, is the process of outlining. I think that can just be invaluable. Taking that second to really think about what you want to say and what story could be attached to that. I have an outline on my website if you want to check it out, um, but basically the concept is if you go into that songwriting resources section,
Let's have a look
you
live here.
have some resources. If you go down to that bottom one there and click on it,
Oh, very cool.
hey, there she is. Isn't she lovely? So
Oh,
basically,
there
if
you
you're
go.
taking a look at something like this, what you can do is start by thinking about what your song is about. What's your main idea? Come up with characters, story setting. You want to introduce that in verse one. You can expand your story, and then usually I like to do the pre-chorus after because the pre-chorus kind of acts like a bridge from one section
Mm.
to another, and you don't want to build a bridge unless you know where it's connecting you to. So,
Bridge
land
to nowhere.
good enough, you need to. So what I like to do is come up with that main idea first, and then you're really just
Mhm.
plugging things in. Think of it like when you were writing an essay for a language arts class, right? You just want to plot out what each section is going to be about. I find that super duper helpful. So I think that's a great place to start as well. And yeah, I think in general, mixing up the process is just really wonderful. Just getting new perspectives as well, working with new people. I know we're going to talk
Mm.
collaboration in a sec, but working with new people is another really wonderful thing to do. You'll learn so much from working with others.
That's cool. Look, but for me, that's something that I've just simply never done. So I've
Yeah.
written probably more than 100 songs, and I've never used an outline for any of them. I probably have subconsciously or accidentally, but more often than not, I'm like, here's my hook, here's my chords, and then just build around it without even really having a structure. So for me, maybe doing it in more of a structured way is going to be a different thing, and that's going to mix things up. So next time I have a bit of a block, I'm going to write my song about your cat's tail.
I
Um,
will also be writing lots of songs about this cat still. She's nuts. She's a sweetheart. She just wants to be on the screen.
What about the actual thing? So, are you a pen and paper? You mentioned, I think, before putting things in your phone. Are you all digital, or are you all pen and paper? Are there any other sort of things that you use for your songwriting and tools, and maybe or apps or anything like that? What's your process of when you sort of start to finish? What are all the things that you use along the way?
I have folders in my phone for days. I tend to be a phone typer just because I'm faster that way. It's a
Mm.
lot quick. My brain moves faster than my hands when I write, so I tend to find that thumbs are a little bit quicker. So yeah, I would say that generally what I do in my own process is I will start with I'll start with voice memos and an instrument
Yep.
plus whatever I'm writing. So I can kind of flip back and forth between those pages. I also am obsessed with songcraft.io. It's a wonderful resource. You can actually put in the tablature on the thing as well if you're writing on a guitar, which I think is awesome. I use it with a lot of students as well.
Oh, this is songcraft.io. I'm just making sure we're
.io.
going to grab this one. Oh, cool.
Wonderful website. I find this just to be so helpful. It also has like a rhyming dictionary and all sorts of cool stuff. So I use them all the time. It's really great for
Ooh,
collaborating, and I use it with my students a lot as well. Just really, really cool platform.
very cool.
Yeah, I
Like it.
use that. I use my voice memos. I use my notes app. It's really kind of simple, to be honest. And then from there, I'm just plugging it into a DAW, or I'm practicing it like crazy, and eventually, getting to the point where I can play it out and perform it. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. I like it, and there you go. I've never used, and this is the thing. There's so many things online now, so many cool free resources, and even some paid resources that are worth checking out. That yeah, I've learned something new here today. So songcraft.io, there you go, folks. Go and check that one out. Thomas has kind of called me out because he's like, you kind of do, Pete, in OneNote, and yeah, embarrassingly, I'm like, oh, actually, I kind of do because I just grabbed my notes section here for a song that I wrote recently, and I'm like, I guess I do kind of exactly that because I do have a plan, and I
Right.
didn't even realize that I was doing it. So I just sort of build this out on the go, and then yeah, Thomas, who knows me better than most people, has said, yeah, you do actually use a plan of the song structure, Pete. So sometimes we don't even know what we do.
Yeah, I have right here. I have my finished songs. I have my in progress songs. I have my old songs. Um,
Oh,
I
very
have
cool.
my, what else do I have? I have poems in here. I also have a folder that I call Sparks. And my Sparks folder is basically where I put any tiny little ideas, right? Like I was
Yeah.
talking about before, when I'm in the shower or I'm driving in my car, or, I'm doing something and I pull over to the side of the road and write something down. That goes right in my Sparks. And Sparks are there to spark ideas. So anytime I need to write something and can't think of what to write, I whiz through those little Sparks and I always find something to write about.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. I think a lot of, and you sort of alluded to this before, that sitting down with absolutely nothing can be quite daunting. But if every time you have those ideas, you capture them, whether they're vocal or musical ideas you capture in your voice memos, or whether they're, text-based ideas for words or lyrics or hooks or whatever it is, then you've got somewhere to start. When you sit down, you're not starting from absolute scratch. You're starting with an idea or a concept. Or if you've got absolutely nothing, you jump into your phone and you grab whatever it is. You just go to some random idea and you're like, let's build around this. Let's see what this is going to do for me today. So,
Don't
yeah.
leave your Sparks folder. Go on your Instagram. Come on. Like, there's stuff everywhere. Everywhere.
If I go on my I'd write a song about how annoying Instagram ads are.
Yes.
That would just be me.
That's so awesome. And even a funny little tidbit, I have no idea if this is true. I might be spreading false information here. But when Paul Simon wrote the song Cecilia, Cecilia is the goddess of inspiration. So when he says, I come back to bed, someone's taken my place, right? He's not talking about this lady. I mean, he is talking about this lady, but he's also talking about how creativity eludes him at various times and how he gets writer's block. So sometimes you can write a song about writer's block. There's always something.
There is always something going on, isn't there? Very, very, very cool. If you're just joining us here, you've missed out all the good stuff. You've got to go back and watch the replay, because we've been chatting for nearly an hour now, all about songwriting. There's been some little tidbits in there of gold that you're going to want to go and check out, because it's very, very cool stuff. Let's say hello to some folks who have joined us since we last said hello. Hello to Mind Logic from Auckland, New Zealand. Hope you're doing well. Master Singleton, thank you for being here as well. Lou Reality, who just did an interview over on Jade Starr's channel. I saw Jade Starr here before as well. So thank you everyone for being here. Dominic Terragrossa, who is a great songwriter. It's actually a really good segue, because you talked about Sparks, and there's a fantastic group called the Song Spark group on Facebook, which I'm a member of. There's also the Songwriters Anonymous, which Dominic Terragrossa and his friends are all part of. Collaborating with others, you mentioned it before with Songcraft, and obviously you teach in schools and you teach privately and you do a lot of teaching. How important is it to collaborate with others and not just be your own person when it comes to songwriting?
I love collaboration so much. I can't get enough of it. I think it is the most fun thing, because personally, I can geek out about songwriting for at five ever, like just eternal geeking forever.
Yeah.
But I find that working with other artists really does open my eyes to a lot of things that, I don't recognize or I don't realize, because again, your little corner of the world is so different from someone else's that you might not realize, like, oh, there's this really cool word that they used, and I've never heard someone use that word like that, or they use this really cool image that I never would have thought of. So, you wind up coming up with just really clever. I wrote this song recently. I'm in this grad program, and we have these little collaborations that we're doing. And we wrote this song called Dark Electric. That was just so dope. And I never would have thought to write some of these concepts, but the women I was working with were so awesome, and they were so on it. And it was really fun. So I've been writing these really fun songs with these other artists a lot recently. And I have to check myself all the time, because my temptation in life is jump in there and say something first. My hands raised first, how I am, I'm like, all right, sit down, April. But what I kind of wind up doing is I sort of have to check myself every now and again and say, wait, this person has something that they can teach me. And even if it's a beginner songwriter, it's their very first song, they can always teach me something. There's always going to be something that I didn't catch or I didn't notice that they're going to recognize, or some cool idea that popped up in their brain that I'm like, you are 8 years old, girl. You know what I mean? I'm like, what on earth? A kid who didn't study music theory because they're super young, and they come up with this chord progression that's super wacky, but you're like, oh my God, look at that modulation you just did, and they have no idea, but we can sort of talk it through together. And I can take my knowledge and they can take their knowledge, and we can sort of come up with this creative little balancing act. So I find that collaborating with others is just the most awesome thing. You can learn so much amazing stuff about your own writing style, about someone else's writing style, about yourself. It's amazing.
Very, very much so. As Apple Charlotte says here, I like that. Every time I see Apple with the Apple and Charlotte, welcome to. We haven't seen Apple Charlotte around the community before, but welcome. If it's your first time watching a show here, welcome aboard. Everyone's checking in from letting us know where they're from. So we've got Pittsburgh, PA, in the house. I know you used to live in the Philly area, in Pennsylvania. Got New York in the house. We've got from the Philippines. We've got people from all over. We've got Montreal, Canada. So we've got folks and Apple from Scotland. There you go. So we are spreading our wings out to all around the world. We'll finish with this final question because I think it's kind of fun. Do you ever wake up at 2 a.m. and have to write or play it immediately, or it is gone forever?
Constantly, all the time. I do all of my best writing when I'm not supposed to be writing. I told you before, I hop out of the shower, all the time. But no, this is a really common thing, and I feel like it's a really funny, common thing among a lot of artists. Like, we all have this weird impulse, like we're having some dream about something and we wake up and we're like, whoa. And then you just gotta start going. You gotta start going, and hopefully not wake up everybody who lives in your house.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the problem, is that try not to wake people up. Metalhead Hippie out of Alaska, who also has a fantastic YouTube channel. Go check out the Hippie. We've got Tucson, Arizona for Mr. Tremor Bear, and Doug Kidder from Washington State. We've got folks from all around here. Can you believe that we're out of time, April? This has been an amazing chat. We've been covering a lot of ground here and a lot of cool information, but let's just make sure it's not nearly 3 years before you're on the channel again and we have a chat again in the future about songwriting. Where's the best place for folks to go to check out all of the stuff that you got going on here on the interwebs?
You can check out my YouTube channel, April Keez, Keez. There I am. Hello. Give them the chills with your song. Check out my YouTube channel. You can check out my cute little website. I think that's up there too. Hey girl, hey. You can check out my music. It's on Spotify, iTunes. It's on Apple Music. All the places listed.
All the places.
It's on Bandcamp too, if you're into that sort of thing.
Nice.
And where else can you find me? I guess I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have my new online course on Skillshare. I actually have 2 online courses on Skillshare. So get that month free and you can watch them and hopefully learn something.
Very cool.
They worked really, really hard on them. So I hope you enjoy them.
Excellent stuff. Very, very cool indeed. And it's been an absolute pleasure for having you on the show again. And I know a lot of people are going to walk away from this all inspired and enthused and ready to create some more cool music. Big shout out to our sponsors, BandLab too. They help facilitate this show. We couldn't do it without their support. And it means that I can get wonderful creators like April here on the show. So thank you to them. Go check out BandLab using the link up the top there or down in the description. And while you're down there, you can hit the thumbs up button if you had a good time here today. You can check out all of April's links down there as well. And coming up right after this show, if you're here live, our buddy Mike over at Creative Source, if you want to learn a little bit more about that whole DAW recording and mixing thing, has a great show called Fix My Mix. Him and Dan, the Lonely Rocker, will be chatting about mixing and reviewing some songs, which is always a really good time. So jump on over there straight after this show.
Awesome.
Thank you for being here. Any final words for our wonderful community here, April?
I am so pleased that I got to hang out with you all. Keep on keeping on, keep on creating, make some beautiful art, songs, music, I don't know, poems, write whatever you want. Enjoy it.
Create, record, release. Love it. Thank you, April. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As we say every week, please be kind to yourself this week, be kind to others, keep creating, and we'll see you next time on the Creator Town Hall. Bye.